yet another journey into one of the most fascinating texts, the Isavasyopanishad, the Isavasya plus the Upanishad. A plus U in Sanskrit equals O. So Isavasya plus Upanishad. So the last word, last alphabet of the first word, Isavasya, A, Upanishad, U. So A plus U in Sanskrit equals O. So Isavasya plus the Upanishad is also called the Isavasyopanishad. The Isavasyopanishad appears in the end portion of the Yajurveda. As we know, the four Vedas, Samaveda, Rigveda, Yajurveda, Atharvana Veda. So it comes in the end portion of the Yajurveda. The end portion of the Vedas contains the philosophical kernel of the text. So the Vedas are large, voluminous texts, and the end portion of the Vedas contains the philosophical kernel. So the Upanishads are the philosophical message contained in the Vedic texts. Just like the Mahabharata is a text which runs into 100,000 verses, but the 700 verses of the Gita gives the philosophical message, without which the text has no weightage, has no real bearing, has no real takeaway. So the Upanishads are the real kernel, are the real philosophical powerhouses, I would say. Now, just a brief, they are all in all 286 Upanishads, out of which 108 are orthodox, they're established. And of the 108, 11 Upanishads are said to be very important because these 11 have been chosen and commented by the great trio, the three great acharyas, Shankara, Madhva, Ramanuja. These three great acharyas have picked this 11 and they have commented on them. So they took importance, precedence over the rest. And if you were to ask me, Isavasyopanishad is perhaps the top of all the Upanishads. There is no greater text, there is no powerful text as potent as the Isavasyopanishad. Now you may ask me, why so many Upanishads? What is the difference? Other day somebody was asking me, why are there so many Upanishads? Are they different? They're all different paths. They're different approaches leading to the same truth. It's like you scale the mountain from different sides. You could scale the mountain from the west or the east or the southeast or the northwest, but whichever way you scale, you will ultimately reach the same peak, the pinnacle. The ultimate point is the same. Exactly the same way these great masters spoke the same truth. So the underlying truth in all these Upanishads, in these Vedas, the scriptures is the same Brahman, the reality, the consciousness. But there are different approaches. So each master brings his unique flavor in describing the unknown truth. Now, how is this Upanishad, the Isavasya, different from the one we just recently concluded, the Kenopanishad? Now, if you remember, when we just did the introduction to the Keno, I had mentioned that Kenopanishad is what is known as a Brahmanopanishad, which means it is more of an explanatory text. As you know, the Upanishad, the Kenopanishad was voluminous. It's voluminous compared to the Isavasya. The Isavasya is a mantropanishad. A mantropanishad in comparison to a Brahmanopanishad, which are authoritative. So mantropanishads are authoritative textbooks. Vis-a-vis the other text, the Kenopanishad is a explanatory textbook, more like an upadesha. An upadesha means giving you a piece of advice. Adesha means a matter of fact, an order of commandment. It's a statement of fact. So Mantropanishad is a authoritative textbook. And I must say, as I've said, it's a very, very powerful textbook. Now, the only benefit you would have of doing texts like these, it only challenges the student to understand the deeper import. The subtler the text, the greater the effort the sadhak has to put. So you will find the starting point is very, very high for this text. Not that the concepts are unfamiliar, but you will find the text very, very high, very, very demanding. Now, before we get into the text, the 18 mantras, so this Upanishad has got only 18 verses in comparison to each chapter of the Gita has got 30, 40 verses. That's 700 verses. Here, only 18 mantras, he finishes it off. So the 18 mantras can be categorized into 7 topics. Now, none of this is original. In fact, this classification, Gayatrima, you can show them, please. The classification of the text into these 7 topics, which the great Sri Aurobindo, he classified them into the 7 waves. So take a snapshot of it and you can jot it down at your convenience. So the 7 waves, the 7 topics, which gives you a panoramic perspective as to what the 18 verses the Isavasya Upanishad has to offer. Now, the very first mantra, he gives the path of renunciation, the path of meditation. This is a very unique style of the scriptures. They cater to the highest caliber of the student, the most sattvic. So here the student has the capacity to renounce the things and beings of the world. He has developed so much vairagya that he has absolute disinterest. He has total dispassion. So he is well and truly on the path of renunciation and meditation. Now the mantra 2 is the second topic. He talks of the path of action. The path of action is meant for those who are not qualified for renunciation. If you fellows can't renounce and meditate, you fellows do some action then. You fellows got too much desires and vasanas, you exhaust them. And then you become worthy of renunciation. Mantra 3, if you can't do 1 and 2, you can commit suicide these days. So then your journey ends here. If you can't renounce, if you can't meditate, if you can't perform action, now from their perspective, actions are only selfless. If at all they compromise and accommodate, it's unselfish. There is no other action they talk of. And if you fellows can't perform selfless or unselfish actions, suicidal. The lowest cadre of people, the tamasic people, their vasanas are so thick, it shrouds it. The thick maze of vasanas cloud the self. They don't see the self at all. It's suicidal. Mantras 4 to 8, he gives the goal of evolution, how to get there. It's very interesting, the choice of words, the liberal usage of the language. In fact, the language comes to the forefront. The liberal language he uses is the language of contradiction. Now, if you want to know what is the language of the Shastras, this is the language of the Shastras. What's the language of the Shastras? The Shastras speak the language of contradiction. And that comes out very beautifully to the forefront in this section, mantras 4 to 8. 9 to 14, fifth topic, he gives the integral sadhana, the action and meditation. And 15 to 17, he dramatizes what happens at the point of realization. So he actually gives us a glimpse as to what happens. It's just the drama of realization. It puts up a beautiful show. In fact, you will, those of you who have not heard or studied or read this Upanishad is famous for this particular section. Like they say, it talks of the sun, which is covered with a golden disc. So if you talk of the sun covered with the golden disc covering it, it is Isavasyopanishad. You may forget the rest of the Upanishad. The golden disc covering the sun is Isavasya. So you will not go wrong. And then the last mantra, the teacher and the taught pray together. Concluding the text. So this, you get an idea as to what the whole text has to offer. Very brief, to the point. There's no beating around the bush. If you fellows can't renounce, act. If you can't act, forget spiritual path. It is suicidal for you all. And then he sort of accommodates and he gives a little description. Otherwise, maybe the master was a little charitable. Otherwise, the Upanishad should have concluded in the first 3 mantras itself. So the Guru is little charitable. 18 mantras he spoke. Now, the word Upanishad can be split into three parts. Upa, Ni, Shad. Upa means sitting near to the master. When you are near to a guru, you develop what is known as a certain receptivity. You are receptive to the knowledge. So Upa symbolizes an intellectual discipline. Ni means sitting below a teacher, an orthodox, a traditional setting where this knowledge would have been transacted. The guru is placed at a higher pedestal, and the shishya sits almost at the feet of the guru. So in order to learn, he has to look up. So his head is slightly tilted upwards. So whenever you look up by sitting below, and when you look up, you develop an attitude of devotion, bhakti. So ni means an emotional, a mental discipline. Shad, upa, ni, shad. Shad means to sit. Sitting symbolizes an introvertedness, an act of inaction, as it were. Not tamas, please. When you're introverted, when you're seated, you go inward. Vis-a-vis, when you're extroverted, You're more action oriented. You are more outward. So when you're sitting, like we all are seated now, what are we doing? We're all going inward. It's an introverted activity. So it's a physical discipline. So Upanishad, an intellectual discipline, which means receptivity. Ni, sitting below, symbolizes devotion, your emotional aspect. The third, Shad, which means sit, symbolizes introvertedness, which is a physical discipline. So the very word Upanishad has such a powerful hidden message. Now, as you would have noted, we chanted the invocation, and this text has, in fact, every text has its own unique invocatory prayer. So it is tradition that we do chant and understand the deeper import of what the invocation means before we enter the text. So let's chant the invocation twice, please. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The Shanti is missing because it is meant to be in silent. So the Shanti has to be inserted. Om Purnam Adah. Adah is that. That refers to Brahman. Purnam Idam. Idam is this, refers to the terrestrial world, is also whole. That is whole. This is whole. Purnam. Purnat. Purna. Mudachyate. From the whole emerges or manifests. So the whole, this has emerged from that. So from the whole manifests, emerges, comes out. Having drawn out the whole, Purnasya Purnamadaya, having taken out the whole from the whole, Purname Avashishyate, the whole Avashishyate, the whole alone remains. Eva, Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Now, the fundamental reason why an invocation is chanted. An invocation is chanted for one fundamental reason, of a couple of reasons. The first reason an Upanishad or an invocation is chanted, and it's chanted both by the teacher and the taught. Everybody chants the invocation. The first purpose of the invocation is to break the monotony of your mundane activities. Now, before you entered this class, what have you been doing? Where were your thoughts? Tirupati Rao, before you came to the class, I don't want to know where you were, huh? But my question is, where were your thoughts? That's all.
Yes, I wanted to answer. I was in the bathroom, but yeah.
I know that. So there's something like that is expected. That's the reason I didn't want to get into the detail.
Yeah. Thoughts were not on this text, the higher truth.
The thoughts are not on the higher, isn't it?
Yeah.
So our thoughts are engaged in the worldly transactions. And in most cases, when your thoughts are engaged in the world, they are confined to those transactions. You're bound to those transactions. In effect, you are limited by the worldly transactions, isn't it? So the chant, what it does is, first, it breaks the monotony of your continuous mundane transactions. From the time you have got up to the time you chanted, it's varying in degree, but still confined to the world. So the chant breaks the monotony, gives you a jerk. So it turns your attention away from the terrestrial to the transcendental. First purpose. Just to tell you, this is just not another routine, mundane activity. First purpose. The second purpose, what it does is it tunes in your intellect and it quietens your mind. So the receptacles are your mind and intellect. It is what that is receiving the knowledge. The patra that receives the knowledge is the mind and intellect. These are the receptacles. So the receptacles, which is the mind and intellect, should be subtilized. The intellect should be tuned in. And the emotion, the mind must be calm, so that, okay, when your receptacles are tuned in, what happens? Which is, when your intellect is sharp and when your mind is calm, what happens? I may take it for granted, but I just want to be sure. Yes, Amitama. When your intellect is sharp and your mind is calm, which are the receptacles? The question is, what happens?
That you're open to receive the knowledge. It clears the, it prepares the environment for the study.
The environment for the study, but you said you are open to
receiving.
But
to receiving the knowledge.
let's say you come to this class. The fact that you are seated here, doesn't it itself mean that you are open to learn? You're here to learn.
I think when you're just seated here, maybe it is just the physical, but the invocation is the preparatory ground for you to be fully engaged mind, intellect, and all the faculties. Yeah.
So what I was trying to get at, it's being perhaps little choosy with the words you have chosen. It's not that it makes you open to receive, it makes the receiving far more precise. The capacity to receive is far greater.
Yeah.
Because let's say if your intellect is not sharp and if your mind is agitated, let's say you had an argument or something, that a news that came your way and it just disturbed you. And with that mental disturbance, you walk into this classroom. You are here. your receptacles are not tuned in. What happens to your ability to receive? You're very open, you want to learn, but since your receptacles are not tuned in, the capacity to receive, let's say the guru is 60% realized, example. The guru can give, to the extent he is realized, he will give that realization to you. But in order to receive 60, you have your receptacles to the maximum. You can't get 80 because the guru has not given 80. The guru has only given 60. But to get what is given, you got to have your 100% receptacles. But the problem is your receptacles are not 100% all the time. Your intellect is not sharp, it's not subtle. Your mind is not 100% pure and calm. Since these receptacles are not perfectly tuned in, you may get 10%, 20%, at max 30, 40%. If anybody out there is getting 60% of what is given, which is 100% as far as you're concerned, you are at a very high level. You can't go higher than the guru because the guru is not realized. I'm not talking of the words, please. You perhaps can convey the message in a more pedantic, in a more, you may have a greater vocabulary to convey, but I'm talking of the spirit of the Shastras, the very essence. To receive that, you ought to have your receptacles. So the invocation breaks the momentum, the monotony. It tunes in, it subtilizes your intellect. In fact, remember, what you need to understand this text is not your gross intellect, but your subtle intellect. You got to understand this. You cannot understand, you cannot grasp this truth with your gross intellect. You need to tap to the subtle intellect to be able to grasp and fathom and relate to the subject matter. It's not possible to understand this text with gross intellect. So the invocation, I suppose you all understand the gross intellect and subtle intellect. When your intellect is engaged in trying to understand something which is beyond the limitations of the terrestrial world, it is termed subtle. It becomes subtle, the operation becomes subtle. But when the same intellect is engaged to analyze your financial transactions, your chartered accountant has clarified something based on your statements you sent him. You have to file your returns and he's asked for some clarification. So you have to apply your head and say, okay, what is this transaction? What is that transaction? You need to clarify. What intellect do you use, Haresh? Do you need to use intellect or not there?
Hariam Guruji. Yes, Guruji.
You need to, isn't it?
Yes, yes. That's more into the, sorry, Guruji.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, so we do need to use our intellect even in those affairs of the world.
We need to use the intellect. But what intellect are you using?
The gross.
The gross intellect. So you may have a very sharp gross intellect, but a very mild or a weak subtle intellect. You may have a weak gross intellect, but you may have a very sharp subtle intellect. That's possible. When I say, I don't know what you understand by a weak gross intellect, but a sharp subtle intellect. What do you understand by that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again, Guruji?
Yeah, I made two statements. One, I said, you may have a very sharp gross intellect, but a very weak subtle intellect. That's one statement. The second I said is you may have a very weak gross intellect, but a very sharp, subtle intellect.
Yes.
And the third combination is you have a very sharp gross intellect and a sharp, subtle intellect to complete the combination. Now, my question is, what do you understand by saying you have a weak gross intellect, but a very sharp, subtle intellect?
From what I understand is when one has a weak gross intellect, they are not very tuned in or very connected to the general world activities in dealing with world activities, and they're more extroverted, but the sharp, subtle intellect is more introverted and they're more within themselves and not as tuned in. I mean, they're more tuned into themselves than they are to the world activities.
Sorry, Harish, somebody disturbed me by typing a message. You'll have to come back to the first half of it. I tell you, when all the good is being done, there are a lot of Rakshasas come and disturb them. Rakshasas and Rakshasis. To be very apt and be very specific. So let's not be distracted by these Rakshasis, to be precise. Yes, Harish, sorry.
Yeah, from what I understand, when somebody has a weak gross intellect, that means they are not very, their intellect is not very developed with the world out there to deal with the world, to have a relationship with the world. But with a sharp, subtle intellect, they are more introverted, and a weak gross intellect, they are more extroverted over there, from what I understand.
No, I don't think you could say that if you have a weak gross intellect, you become more extroverted. No, I don't think it is right to say that. But you're right to say that they have a very sharp, subtle intellect. They're more introverted. They're well attuned to the higher. But the statement has not been clarified. I'll still look for any comments. Okay, Harish?
Yes, Guruji.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Maybe if I can ask Suranarayan Garu, I don't know whether you've come for the satsangs before, but I see you for the first time, sir.
Yeah, today only I joined.
Right. So welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Any idea? So I'm afraid there's a lot of feedback, a lot of noise we're getting at your end. I'm afraid we'll have to mute you, sir. But just happy to have you go through the flow. And if there's anything that it doesn't echo well with you, please feel free to clarify. It's not possible that you, however familiar you are with the studies, there's a specific connotation or a usage or a language every guru or every approach has. So feel free to clarify, So maybe we should go to the source of that statement. Rajima, please explain yourself.
Guruji, I beg your forgiveness, but I just mentioned that, you're an example of a person who would have probably not a weak intellect, but a person who's not interested in the terrestrial transactions and more interested in or more inclined towards the transcendental transactions, and therefore not that you have the intellect is not sharp there, but you will require assistance in business or in accounts or in worldly transactions such as those, Guruji. I'm sorry.
No. No. I knew where you were coming from, and I knew you have what you've read me and how from where you make that statement. I know. See, what she said is exactly what I was actually trying to get at. Perhaps, when you have a sharp, gross intellect, if you have then you are very street smart, as I use the word street smart. You can manage things, you can get along, you can, how to deal with the shrewdness of the world. You are very manipulative. You will know many the laws and the rules and the ways of doing these worldly things. And I have had many people coming and tell me, and a few people from this platform here, they come tell me, Guruji, you're very naive. You don't know how to do this. You don't know, you're very this and that, we will take care of that. Don't worry of that, So I had many people say that. Now, why? So it's not that it's a weak gross intellect. Now, the weak gross intellect is because of non-application. The intellect is the same. It is the field of operation that makes it sharp or gross. How is it possible that you have a very sharp, subtle intellect and a weak gross intellect? It's weak because it is not applied in that arena. But wherever you apply, it's a matter of application. You will pick up that dexterity. You will pick up that ability to discern. You will have the clarity of thought, how to make the right choices. But out of sheer lack of interest, you don't apply yourself in certain fields. Therefore, it may appear as if it is weak, but it's not that the intellect is weak, it's because lack of application. But there are people who, because of their necessity to adapt, they have a sharp gross intellect, sharp subtle intellect. But in order to attune to the text, you need to bring your subtle intellect to the forefront. And to the extent your subtle intellect is sharp, to that extent, you will attune to the message given out by the Guru. And that is what the invocation does. It tunes in your intellect from the gross operations to subtle operation. Because it's a subtle operation, your subtle intellect comes to the forefront. Your gross intellect is little dormant. Like your subtle intellect is dormant when you're doing worldly transactions. This interaction, the gross intellect becomes dormant. Your subtle intellect comes to the forefront. Now, the verse is outstanding. The invocation is outstanding, where he says, that is whole. That refers to Brahman, the reality, the consciousness. Purnam. Purnam is what? It's complete, is whole. Paripurna. It's wholesomeness. We can understand that is whole. The Brahman is the same as the Father in the heaven. The Brahman is same as Allah. All these are the same. That is Purnam, whole. And then he says, this is also Purnam. This refers to the world. This is whole. I don't know. These are some of the statements you don't need any explanation. It's so grand and pure. It is best left as it is. Purnamada. See, they didn't explain. No, we are trying to dissect it. We are trying to break it up, and we are trying to find the meaning of it. Certain things are best left as it is, and for you to feel the pulse. Reddy Garu, just feel it, sir. Don't think too much. Like other day, somebody gave me this advice. Guruji, you're thinking too much. Stop thinking, they said.
Pranam Guruji. No. It's not thinking. I'm just trying to make a point, because I'm just coming out from the sharp and grass situation to the current topic the moment we come here. No, it's interesting, Guruji. I'm trying to get to know about the facts.
I'm sure we've heard this concept earlier in different contexts.
Yes, Guruji.
it's almost a different operation. What tool you use for a gross operation and what tool you use for a subtle operation are two different things. So the example often is used is like you have a spanner for a locomotive, or you have and then you have a spanner or a screwdriver to repair your wristwatch. You can't switch a tool for a wristwatch to a locomotive, can you?
Yes, not.
It almost becomes miniaturized toy. It has no, it doesn't, it's not, it becomes irrelevant.
Yes.
The wristwatch is smaller than the spanner of a locomotive. So how does it fit in? It doesn't gel. A second example is given is you use an axe to fell a tree. You chop with an axe. And also you use a razor blade to shave. Just because your razor blade is out of stock, you can't say, let's use an axe and shave. Would you?
No.
Please don't. One slip, it could be a very fatal slip.
Maybe still the gross intellect is active, Guruji.
Thank God. Little bit intellect is still there, you know. Now, what we are saying is felling a tree is a gross operation, shaving is subtle operation. All right. Now, furthermore, what we're saying, the axe can be sharp or blunt. The razor blade can be sharp or blunt. It's possible that the razor blade has become blunt. It's also possible that the axe is very sharp. So there are two things. One is the field of operation, which is gross intellect. And then whether it is sharp or subtle, there are two things.
Yes.
So where you operate makes it gross. Whether you have a sharp or a blunt intellect is of different nature. So how many of you have got a sharp, subtle intellect? How many of you have got a blunt, subtle intellect? Weak. What is it that determines? So I ask you all this question. What is it that determines the strength of your subtle intellect?
Is it asking me, Guruji?
If you have a comment, sir.
It's more aligning to the spiritual knowledge is the one which the progress towards that, it make you more enhance the strength of a subtle intellect.
Towards spiritual knowledge, okay.
It's more like you getting disconnected from the terrestrial activities, because in the terrestrial, I don't think a subtle can have a role. That's what my understanding from this discussion.
Okay. All right. You're not wrong at all. But let me hear from others. Perhaps it will give you a clearer picture, sir.
Yes.
Arunama.
Hari Om Guruji.
Hari Om. Hari Om.
Yeah. Guruji, what comes to my mind is, I think whether we have a strong, sharp, subtle intellect or not, it depends upon what we have learned, the concept of Nitya, Anitya, Viveka, Vichara. That means we are able to identify what is real and unreal in our transactions. Like we realize that the world is not permanent, it is transitory, it is forever changing. So that ability to relate to what is real and unreal, what is permanent and impermanent. So that discriminative ability, I suppose that's what comes to my mind.
Absolutely right. So the capacity to discern between nitya and anitya, eternal and ephemeral, isn't it? Now, how sharp your subtle intellect is determined when you are amidst the anitya, when you are not in a satsang like this, when you are not in a scriptural study or a satsang or an environment like this. How rooted are you in this knowledge determines how strong a subtle intellect is. Are you able to understand what I say? Maybe Ramji can just recap what I've said, sir.
Namaste, Guruji.
Namaskar, sir.
Yeah, so you are saying that how strong is your subtle intellect is reflected in how rooted are you in understanding the what is it, the transcendental facts while in the midst of the terrestrial activity and in the midst of the terrestrial facts. I think that ability to perform the terrestrial activities but detach yourself from it at the same time to think of the ephemeral is the subtle intellect. I think that's what you meant, or that's what you conveyed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Very, very beautifully recapped. So the capacity to attune to the eternal and be detached to the ephemeral. So that
Yeah.
the ability to discern and dissect is so clear that you are reminded of your purpose. So the subtle intellect, it gives the job of the intellect is to give direction, isn't it?
Correct.
The subtle intellect gives the direction to the goal of realization. So am I reminded of the goal through the worldly transactions? And you all can assess yourself. How much are you swayed by the worldly activities and how much are you withdrawn to your inner self, even in the worldly activities? So if the calling is very loud and clear, what will happen, Ramji?
Then the calling is very loud and clear, then your journey into the spiritual space is much better or much faster.
You wouldn't get lost.
You won't get lost. Yeah, you are rooted, or as I said, you are more rooted to the journey. Yeah,
Correct. You're very rooted to the path, to the goal, and that directly depends on the strength of your subtle intellect.
yeah. But I have one question, Guruji.
I knew that. Chepan sir, please.
If we go by the definition that intellect is the one which helps you to convert knowledge into wisdom, okay? So am I right in saying that subtle intellect helps you to convert?
Sorry, could you come to that statement again, please? The first statement.
If we go by the understanding that intellect helps you to convert knowledge into wisdom.
Wrong.
Wrong. Okay.
It is when you have wisdom, you have an intellect. Wisdom and intellect are synonymous.
Okay, then that's different from my understanding. So I have to correct myself. So I always thought that when you are performing things, your ability to convert your knowledge or your experiences into wisdom is dependent on how you use your intellect to do that. No.
So what converts knowledge into wisdom is the process of reflection.
Okay.
That the process of churning and questioning, even though that is an intellectual discipline,
yeah,
that is not akin to saying the intellect.
Okay, it's an intellectual process, but not intellect itself.
Not intellect. So the end product is the intellect.
Okay.
And that is measured by, if I have, let's say, 40% intellect with me, you can say he is 40% wise. You can synonymously use. these two terms.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. No,
I have understood it better. Thank you.
Right, right. No, I just felt a jerk when you use that statement construction. So I said, let me revisit that. Now, if you want to complete the question, if the question still stands.
No, I was only trying to say that the subtle intellect helps you to, but I think now you corrected, then I can't be right, because I was thinking that subtle intellect helps you to grasp the higher wisdom better than what the gross intellect can do. While the gross intellect helps you to actually, even in the worldly things, you need wisdom. It's not like you can manage worldly things without wisdom. So that wisdom comes out of your worldly interactions, but converting all that experiences and worldly knowledge into worldly wisdom. So these two wisdoms are different. That's what I was trying to ask, whether that understanding is correct.
No, so the wisdom is the same. I may not be interested in a particular field of activity. Therefore, I may be ignorant. Like you may ask me, sir, do I have the intellect or the wisdom to deal with stock market? I would say no. First of all, I don't have the knowledge. I don't have the know-how. I don't have the vasana or interest or inclination. But if you want to apply the intellect in stock market, it will take a lot out of me to understand the market, how to make that decisions to invest or not to invest. And perhaps you will be far more objective to make the decision because you're making the decision based on the intellect. But since you don't have a calling, nor is there an interest in that, you may say, I have no wisdom in that particular field, but the wisdom is the same. It depends on where you apply it.
No, I thought in a different way. I thought if you are already a stock market operator who is well versed with the knowledge of market operations, but you don't take ups and downs as emotional, ups and downs, and you are
Yes.
equanimous about ups and downs in the stock market.
Correct.
Then you are more wiser than the guy who gets very happy when he makes money and who gets into depression when he loses money.
Correct.
Right? That is the way I understood the impact of or the relevance of wisdom in day-to-day activities. Like you used to say many times that you are in this philosophical, you are an expert in this space, but there are many experts who use it to make money. There are many experts who use it to make a fame, but there are many people who use it like you, who use it to elevate others through dissemination of knowledge. So these are all with different purposes. So who is wiser among these three? That was the thing which
all are they're using it for a specific purpose. They're engaging it in the field of activity. That's all I would say. I wouldn't say one is inferior or superior, but if you do really want to come to a conclusion or come to create an impression, you are subtler or greater the fact that what you choose to pursue. The fact that you choose to pursue the highest puts you in a different cadre than the rest.
Yeah.
See, even in my own personal thing, I've never ever drawn, I'm not interested to market this knowledge. You may have enough stuff to market it, or there's enough in it to dilute it and give it the new jargons and play like these gurus do out there. No, there is, if you can I play that role? It's like me trying to fit into a shoe which is not my size. I'll struggle. It'll start. I can't put a few steps forward because it's not me. Like I will be this rest of my life. This is what I am. This is me. you know. And if you compare the fact that what you are, so I may be, let's say, I can be the top. Let's say I'm an athlete. I'm a top in the local community competition. I have come last in Olympics. The fact that I have represented the Olympics, I'm far superior than a fellow who is a continuous gold winner in the local championships. Am I right?
Yeah.
It's not I've come first or last. The fact that I have represented my country in the Olympics puts me in a different caliber, in a different cadre altogether, in different kind, not even degree, different kind altogether. So in that sense, it's of a wisdom of a different order altogether. That's the reason I'm saying you can be wise, street smart, but you can be dumbfounded with reference to the higher purposes of life.
Yeah, true.
So the first combination, many people are very wise, street smart. They may have a sharp, gross intellect, but they have a blunt, subtle intellect. You can talk, they will not be able to relate to this knowledge. That's very common. You may catch all your IIT, IIM guys, brilliant heads. You talk this knowledge, they say, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in all this. You know, they show a cold face. You know, they don't have a calling, but they are brilliant heads. You all are smart fellows. You all have you are very successful in your fields. You have led industries. You're leaders of your industry, but that doesn't necessarily make you qualify for this higher intellectual knowledge, isn't it? You all have the right intellects, but that doesn't necessarily qualify you into this arena. That's the sad reality of it, and only this concept will justify.
Yeah, we have 2 qualified people in this group. IIT, yeah.
No, that is not overqualified. You all are so right, sir. Does that help, sir?
Yes, thank you, Guruji.
Thank you. Right, sir. Right. Yes. To begin with, Harish, yes, please.
Guruji, I want to also check on your question, what is it that determines the strength of your subtle intellect? Will it be correct to answer that if we do constant repetitive practices, no matter how challenging it is, for example, waking up at 4 a.m. every morning to do our studies, that determines our subtle intellect? Would this be one example, Guruji?
One who has that calling. I'm sorry, I think you are muted, Harish. I'm sorry.
Yes, Guruji.
Yes. So you're saying something?
Yeah, so would that be also a correct understanding? This answer, would that also be categorized as that determines the strength of the subtle intellect?
I wouldn't strictly say so, but what determines whether you are available for that early hour study and things is your predominance of sattva. If your sattva is predominant, you can't sleep beyond 4:35. Indian time for Indians, Malaysian time for Malaysians, Hong Kong time for Hong Kongites, and American time for Americans. Because people from different regions are here. So for convenience sake, it's not my 4 a.m. is not what your 4 a.m. So you got to go with your timing.
Okay.
So that is not that determines whether your subtle intellect is sharp. If your sattva is more predominant, you will get up. If your tamas is less predominant, what would happen? Okay, Harish, don't answer that. Don't answer that. I'll ask Milima.
You don't get up, I guess. Namaste.
Namaskar. Now, No, can you answer the other way? Okay, when your tamas is more predominant, what would happen?
You're not interested in to study if your tamas is predominant.
Yes, it's not only steady, you know, there are people who wake up early hours naturally. It comes not because of age, it's because of a certain affinity to be available to the early hour. You may get up and go for a walk, or you may go and you may sit quietly, or you may do a particular study, or whatever. You may listen to music, you may meditate, whatever you're doing. But if the sattva is predominant, you would get up. If tamas is more active, you will not sleep early, you will be awake late hours. That's the answer I was seeking. Because you sleep late, you wake up late, isn't it?
Yeah.
Am I right? So if in a person whose tamas is less, what would happen? You would get to bed early, isn't it?
Hmm.
So by the sheer lifestyle you lead, it indicates very heavily of your own hidden mental nature, gunas. What kind of a person are you? Isn't it?
Hmm.
All right. Right now. Hariji, Solongo.
Hari Om.
Hariam, sir.
Guruji, is it correct if I say the more the objectivity, the stronger the subtle intellect?
No. Let's say your daughter comes to you and say, Dad, I lost my phone. You don't have to tap the subtle intellect for that. If you're a little objective and say, okay, we'll see where you lost it, find out where was it last you used it, and you give her advice and say, find out where you last kept it, and let's see if you can trace your. It happened to me. You know, it happened once, and in fact, it happened in where was this? This Buddhist monk. Who is this famous Buddhist monk we have? Dalai Lama. And where is this Dalai Lama ashram? In Sidhbari. Yeah? In where is it, Rajima?
Dharamshala, Guruji.
Dharamshala, correct. In Dharamshala, there's this monastery, the Buddhist monastery of the great Dalai Lama. You know? And I remember we were there, and I'm just sharing this experience, answering your questions. We were told to take off our footwear. I had my phone in hand. I kept the phone on the bench and I was removing my footwear. I removed the footwear. They said, put in the shelf. We put in the shelf and we went inside. And as I was entering the monastery, the monastery, that the shrine area, for a moment, I felt my hands were empty. You know, I realized the mobile phone was missing. I checked my pockets, it wasn't there. And just, it came as a flash that I had kept the phone on the bench. A matter of a minute or two, go back, the phone is missing. And then the next 15, 20 minutes, what we did was sheer use of intellect. There was no hangama, there was no noise. There was somebody else with me. We went to the security. We said, this phone has what is known as, it can be tracked. We start tracking it, and it was held at the security before the person could leave the thing. I'm trying to tell you, there are ways, if you're smart enough, you know how to pick up, figure out what happened. For that, you don't need subtle intellect, sir. If you're objective and your emotions don't disturb you, you can control your emotions, take the right course of action, and come to a solution. Where subtle intellect, there, objective is not to get involved. That's objectivity, isn't it? Where you don't get involved in any situation and you are able to take a rational decision without emotion clouding your intellect. That is being objective. This has got nothing to do with subtle intellect.
Is the reverse statement, suppose I say the stronger the subtle intellect, the more will be the objectivity. If I reverse the statement, will it
Even that, it is wrong to conclude that way also.
Okay.
See, I may have a sharp gross intellect.
Yeah.
So all my decisions, all my relationships, all that I do, I'm very objective. I'm not fluttered. I've got a very sane head. I'm very matured. But I can be zero with reference to the spiritual thing, because my subtle intellect is weak, is bleak. But
Yeah,
to the extent I have my intellect, I'm very objective. So I'm trying to be very clear. Your objectivity is measured by the strength of your intellect.
No, my question,
not the subtle intellect.
My question that if I have a stronger subtle intellect, I will be more objective. Okay, so fine. It is.
You wouldn't see. You may not be interested in the activity.
Okay.
Your objective or not is
okay. Fine.
Is stretching it.
Okay.
Little too much, I believe.
Okay. Fine.
You get it?
Okay. Fine.
Right. Now there you go. Just to help you, Shivaji says it's very subjective. So how objective you are is very subjective. Correct, sir. நீங்க ரொம்ப objective-ஆ இருக்கீங்க நீங்க. Yes, Shivaji.
I have to share on one particular aspect you were saying, that reaching more and more people may not be your prerogative. It need not be your prerogative, but the subject needs to reach the people. The content has to reach. A singer is good not singing in the bathroom. He may be the best singer in the world. He is not satisfied unless until he is able to enthrall the masses. They are not doing it for their own self. It is to raise that thing. On that aspect, I differ from you. When you say that you are quite satisfied with what the limited audiences, we need to reach more and more, because the subject, the content, the knowledge, the wisdom has to reach.
I didn't say, you're putting words into my mouth. I didn't say I'm content with this audience. I didn't say I didn't want to reach.
No,
I don't want to.
The people are reaching. They're reaching because they have found a way they need to reach, because the content has to reach. It is not that your intention or your sankalp, because that the wisdom has to reach.
I am very much with you that this knowledge should reach to as many people as possible. And I don't want to just sing in the bathroom. I'll be happy to be given a platform. So I don't think I meant that. So it's not that. Ayyo, enna Gayatri ma?
What you meant is that you cannot go on, propagating that this is what it is available. You wait for the people to come, that is what I felt.
He who sees it, sees it. He who understands me, understands me. I perhaps, as Setuji was saying, yes, Setuji.
Hariom Guruji.
Yes, sir. Hariom, sir.
My inference is what you meant was you are principled and you don't want to compromise, but you are patient enough, people will do come, and you do require, you would like to reach out to wider audience, but not compromising on your ethos.
Correct. No, I think you got the sentiment with which I approach my work. It's trying to what I want to present or what is being offered is pure quality. I don't want to compromise on that, And if it takes time, it takes time. It's not that some of you just know me, but I've been into classrooms teaching students for a lot of years, and the numbers have never demotivated me, or nor would the numbers enthuse me. In my spiritual journey, initial days when I started sharing this knowledge, and those who used to listen to my classes 25 years ago, and they come, and a lady in particular, she used to tell many a time, she said, Guruji, I used to take classes in Kachaguda, Tulja Bhavan, I used to go. For years, I went there. This is a rain or shine. I used to go on a two-wheeler those days. Rain or shine, you would come, and if two people were seated there, you'll take the drive at that hour, in that rain, in that raincoat, you will come and teach. And that dedication you had, I can't forget those days, how you used to teach. So I'm just holding on to what I was told. The moment you compromise on quality, you will get numbers. You don't compromise on the quality, you may have less numbers, but you will do justice to the Shastras. There are not many out there who do that. And I want to, it's not being egoistic when I say that. We owe it to this great text to do justice to what they have imparted, not just to reach out to numbers with quality. And the thumb rule is, where there is quality, there is no quantity. Applicable in all walks of life. You examine it, where there are numbers, there is no quality. In every aspect of life, whether be it any education field, whether you talk in terms of how many people in an organization have the capacity to replace a chairman. Very few. Chairman is retiring, the organization has got 100,000 employees. How many people, Reddigaru, an organization, an MNC has got 100,000 employees. The chairman is retiring. How many people are qualified to be the next successor of the chairman?
Very few, Guruji. Handful of the people. That's it.
Handful of them, isn't it? But the employer has got 100,000
people. There is the quantity versus the quality.
So how many times in Hyderabad you come across a Rolls Royce?
Very rare.
You go and tell Rolls Royce, why don't you want the billion population to ride Rolls Royce? What would they say, sir?
They generally say that they have been evolved and they are more qualitative and they were focused and they want to be something differentiate from the rest of the world, and that's where they position themselves, the brand or the product.
So we are not positioning ourselves. We have the understanding. The understanding is that when you are with intellectuals, the seekers are far less than the other devotional people. So therefore, the market is far lesser, is selective. And in that, if you are very precise and far more enriched in the content, you'll draw that few lesser seekers, because they want honey. We just don't want to give fragrance. We want to give the real honey. But how I don't want to justify it, but the effort of ours and everybody, including Shivaji, our effort should be to reach out to serve as many people as possible, so that the knowledge uplifts and transforms. So there's efforts being made so that people understand the language. For example, the day after tomorrow, the Monday morning onward, we are starting a new text where we are doing selected verses of Sant Kabir. We're trying to brand it as eternal wisdom dialogue, so that there are people who are not ready for the deeper waters of an Upanishad also are catered to. So there is enough to offer. It's only for you to bring in the audience. So put in effort, knock every door possible, do every effort that's needed to bring in more people. And we will talk the language which will appeal to them, so that they are benefiting into their daily walk of life. It's not that I'm saying I'm only going to talk Upanishad. No, I'm willing to talk in any language, any text, in any way, so that it can benefit and serve people. We will have to come back to the text Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate. We'll come back to this briefly. We'll study the rich import of the invocation, and we'll truly embark onto the first mantra of the Isavasya. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.